Hold it in your hand for a second. It's heavier than you expect. Golden, almost bronze, with a strange warmth to it that the quarters and dimes in your pocket don't have. Flip it over. On one side, a young woman looks over her shoulder, a baby wrapped against her back. On the other, an eagle soars over 13 stars. Most Americans have touched one of these coins maybe twice in their life. Maybe never. And yet, this little piece of metal carries one of the most ambitious stories the United States Mint has ever tried to tell, a story about a teenage girl who helped guide a nation's expansion, a story about a government that tried, and struggled, and tried again, to put a dollar coin into the hands of the American public. This is the story of the Sacagawea dollar, what some collectors still call the Native American dollar, and why, depending on the year stamped on its edge, it might be sitting in a drawer worth exactly $1, or quietly worth 100 times that. I'm Coin Legacy, and this is the story behind the coin nobody spends. To understand why the Sacagawea dollar exists, you have to understand something strange about American money. The United States has never been able to make its people actually use a dollar coin. It's tried, over and over again, for almost 200 years, and almost every single time, the public has quietly rejected it in favor of the paper bill. Go back to 1794, and you'll find the very first United States dollar coin, the flowing hair dollar, a big chunk of silver almost the size of a half-dollar coin today. It was beautiful. It was also heavy, awkward in a pocket, and frankly, paper money was just easier to carry around. Dollar coins came and went through the 1800s, the seated Liberty dollar, the Morgan dollar, the Peace dollar, gorgeous pieces of art that collectors adore today, but coins that the average American mostly lets sit in bank vaults rather than carry to the market. By the 1970s, the government tried again. This time, the face on the coin wasn't a goddess of liberty, it was Susan B. Anthony, the suffragist who fought for women's right to vote. The Susan B. Anthony dollar launched in 1979 with real fanfare. It was meant to be modern, meant to be useful, meant to finally get Americans comfortable carrying a coin instead of a bill. It flopped almost immediately. The problem was simple and a little embarrassing. The Anthony dollar was nearly the same size, the same color, and the same weight as a quarter. People grabbed it out of their change, assumed it was a quarter, and spent it without a second thought, or worse, mistook a quarter for a dollar and lost money in vending machines. Banks returned huge stockpiles of unused Anthony dollars to the Federal Reserve. By the mid-1980s, the U.S. Mint had warehouses sitting on hundreds of millions of coins nobody wanted. For more than a decade after that, the Anthony dollar limped along in a strange half-life, not really discontinued, but barely minted, kept alive mostly because vending machine and transit companies needed some dollar coin to keep their machines running. By the 1990s, Washington decided to try one more time. But this time, they wanted to fix the exact mistake that killed the Anthony dollar. They wanted a coin that looked nothing like a quarter, that felt different in the hand, that told a story Americans hadn't heard on their money before. That decision would lead to one of the most quietly fascinating design processes in modern American coinage, and it would lead the Mint to a name most Americans only barely remembered from their high school history class, Sacagawea. Here's something that surprises a lot of people: nobody actually knows exactly what Sacagawea looked like. There are no portraits made during her lifetime. No sketches drawn from life. Everything we think we know about her face is, in a very real sense, an educated guess, which makes the coin you're holding not a photograph in metal, but an act of imagination shaped by history. So who was she, really? Sacagawea was a member of the Lemhi Shoshone people, born around 1788 in what's now Idaho. As a young teenager, she was captured by a rival tribe, the Hidatsa, and taken hundreds of miles from her home. Eventually, she was sold, in the brutal custom of the era, to a French-Canadian fur trader named Toussaint Charbonneau, who took her as a wife. She was likely only about 13 or 14 years old. In 1804, an expedition arrived at the Hidatsa Mandan villages along the Missouri River, led by two men named Meriwether Lewis and William Clark. President Thomas Jefferson had sent them west with an enormous task: explore the newly purchased Louisiana Territory, find a water route to the Pacific, and make contact with the native nations whose land the expedition would be crossing. Lewis and Clark needed Charbonneau for his trading connections, but what they really needed, whether they fully realized it at first or not, was Sacagawea. She was around 16 years old, pregnant with her first child, when the expedition set out in the spring of 1805. Within weeks, she gave birth to a son, Jean-Baptiste Charbonneau, on the trail itself. And from that point on, she carried that infant on her back for thousands of miles across rivers, mountains, and plains, the same image, almost exactly, that the U.S. Mint would choose to put on a coin nearly 200 years later. Sacagawea's role on the expedition is often boiled down to one simple phrase: she was the guide. But the real story is more layered than that. She wasn't the expedition's mapmaker. What she actually provided was something arguably more valuable. She was a translator and a diplomatic bridge into Shoshone territory. She recognized landmarks from her childhood that helped the party navigate the Rocky Mountains, and, in one of the most quietly remarkable moments of the journey, when a boat capsized on the Missouri River and nearly lost crucial expedition records, supplies, and instruments, it was Sacagawea who calmly retrieved them from the water as others scrambled in panic. And there's something else historians point to again and again: a native woman traveling with a baby, alongside this strange group of armed men, signaled something important to the tribes they encountered. War parties did not typically travel with women and infants. Her presence helped communicate, again and again across hundreds of miles of unfamiliar territory, that this expedition came in peace. She survived the entire 2.5-year journey to the Pacific Ocean and back. What happened to her afterward is less certain. Most historical accounts suggest she died around 1812, still a young woman, likely in her mid-20s, after the birth of a daughter. Some Shoshone oral traditions tell a different story, claiming she lived a long life and eventually returned to her people in Wyoming, dying an elder in 1884. Historians still debate which account is closer to the truth. What's not in debate is this: by the late 1990s, the U.S. Mint needed a face for a new dollar coin, and they wanted someone who represented a chapter of American history that paper money and coinage had almost entirely ignored: the contributions of Native American people to the building of the country. Sacagawea was the obvious, almost inevitable choice. So if there's no portrait of Sacagawea, how do you put her on a coin? The Mint turned to a sculptor named Glenna Goodacker, an artist already well known for her public memorial work, including the Vietnam Women's Memorial in Washington, D.C. The U.S. Mint director at the time, Philip N. Deal, wanted the new dollar coins design selected through an open competition, but he also wanted something specific for the obverse, the heads side, a modern, living Native American face standing in for Sacagawea, since no historical likeness existed. Goodacker found her model in an unusual place: a college student. Randy L. Hidao Teton, a young Shoshone-Bannock and Cree woman studying at the University of New Mexico, was approached to pose as the reference for Sacagawea's face. She wasn't a professional model and had no idea, at the time, the role she'd end up playing in American coinage history. Goodacker sculpted the portrait using Teton's features as the foundation, deliberately giving the coin a strong, dignified, forward-looking expression: a young Native woman, not a generic historical caricature, but someone who looked like she actually belonged on a journey across a continent. The design shows Sacagawea in three-quarter profile, her son Jean-Baptiste, nicknamed Pomp by Lewis and Clark, wrapped in a cradleboard on her back, exactly as historical accounts describe her carrying him on the expedition. Above her head, the word Liberty arches across the top of the coin. To the left, "In God We Trust." If you look closely near her shoulder, you'll find Goodacker's initials, GG. The reverse, the tails side, was designed separately by Thomas D. Rogers, a U.S. Mint sculptor engraver. It shows a soaring eagle, wings spread wide, surrounded by a ring of 17 stars, representing the 17 states that were part of the Union at the time of the Lewis and Clark expedition. And then there's the color. Unlike the silvery Susan B. Anthony dollar that came before it, the Mint wanted this coin to be unmistakable, a coin you could recognize by feel and by sight without even looking at it. So they made a deliberate choice, a golden-colored alloy, made primarily of copper but with a manganese-brass outer layer designed to mimic the look of gold. It contains zero actual gold. But the warm, brassy color did exactly what the mint hoped. It made the coin instantly distinguishable from a quarter, even in a dimly lit cash drawer or by touch alone in a pocket. They also gave the coin a distinctive wide, plain edge, no reading, no ridges, another deliberate difference from the Anthony dollar's edge, designed purely so a blind or visually impaired person could tell, just by running a finger along the rim, that they were holding a dollar and not a quarter. Every decision, from the face to the metal to the edge, was a direct response to the failure of the coin that came before it. This was a coin engineered, quite literally, to not be confused for anything else. It debuted in January of 2000, with a marketing push the mint had never really attempted before, including a national promotional partnership with, of all companies, Cheerios. This next part sounds almost too strange to be true, but it's one of the most famous chapters in modern American coin collecting. In the months before the coin's official public release, General Mills struck a promotional deal with the U.S. Mint. To build buzz ahead of launch, roughly 5,500 brand-new Sacagawea dollars were placed into specially marked boxes of Cheerios cereal, distributed to grocery stores across the country in the year 2000. Most of those coins were entirely ordinary, just early examples of the new design, a fun surprise tucked between the cereal flakes for whoever happened to grab the right box. But a small handful of those Cheerios coins turned out to be something else entirely. They had been struck using an early version of the eagle reverse design, one with noticeably enhanced tail feather detail compared to the design that ultimately went into mass production. Collectors now call this the Cheerios reverse variety. Nobody knew it at the time. These were just dollar coins inside cereal boxes, and most families who found one either spent it, kept it as a curiosity in a junk drawer, or handed it to a kid as a novelty. It took collectors years of careful comparison, examining the exact spacing and detail of the eagle's tail feathers, to confirm that a small number of these Cheerios coins were genuinely different from every other Sacagawea dollar ever struck. Today, an authenticated Cheerios dollar with the enhanced tail feather reverse is one of the most valuable coins in the entire Sacagawea Native American series. Certified, well-preserved examples have sold at auction for tens of thousands of dollars, some confirmed sales reaching well into the $20,000 to $30,000 range, and rumors, never fully confirmed, of even higher private sales. It's a remarkable thought, somewhere in America, possibly still sitting in someone's coffee can of old coins, completely unrecognized, there may be a Cheerios dollar worth more than a used car, and the owner has no idea. Despite the redesign, despite the new color, despite the breakfast cereal marketing campaign, the golden dollar ran into almost the exact same problem the Anthony dollar had. Americans simply did not adopt it for everyday spending. Vending machines, transit systems, and casinos used plenty of them, but the general public kept reaching for paper ones and quarters out of habit. Mintage numbers for general circulation dropped sharply after the initial launch year. By the mid-2000s, the U.S. Mint was striking Sacagawea dollars almost exclusively to fulfill legal requirements and collector demand rather than genuine commercial need. Then, in 2007, Congress passed the Native American $1 Coin Act, which kept Sacagawea on the obverse permanently but began rotating a new reverse design every single year, each one honoring a different aspect of Native American history and culture. Agricultural innovations, treaties, the code talkers of World War II, contributions to space exploration, and more. From that point forward, collectors began calling the series the Native American dollar, even though the front of the coin, Sacagawea and her son, never changed. This yearly rotation is exactly why, if you go looking for one of these coins today, you'll find dozens of different reverse designs, all sharing that same recognizable golden front. So let's get practical. You've got one of these in a drawer somewhere, what's it actually worth? For the overwhelming majority of Sacagawea and Native American dollars, the honest answer is exactly what's printed on it, $1. Billions of these coins were struck for circulation, and most years are common enough that a coin in average, circulated condition has no meaningful premium over face value. But there are real exceptions, and they're worth knowing. The 2000p Cheerios dollar with the enhanced tail feather reverse, as we covered, can be worth tens of thousands of dollars in certified condition. There's also a related, separate variety called the 2000p Wounded Eagle, named for a die gouge that creates a scratch-like mark across the eagle's breast, far more common than the Cheerios variety, but still collectible, typically selling for somewhere in the range of a few hundred to over $1,000 depending on condition and certification. Beyond varieties, condition matters enormously. A coin that spent years circulating through pockets and cash registers, picking up scratches and losing its luster, is worth face value to most buyers. But an uncirculated coin, one that never entered general circulation, still showing its full original mint luster, can carry a real premium, especially in the earliest years of the series or in official mint packaging like proof sets and uncirculated mint sets. Proof versions, struck specifically for collectors with mirror-like fields and frosted designs, are a different category entirely, often selling for anywhere from a few dollars to several hundred depending on the year, the mint, and the specific design. And then there are the genuine rarities, coins struck in error, coins with double dies, coins struck on the wrong planchet entirely. These are the coins that turn a flea market box of junk dollars into a five-figure discovery, and it's exactly why experienced collectors learn to actually look, really look, at every one of these coins that crosses their hands, instead of assuming they're all the same. If you take one thing away from this section, let it be this: never assume. Check the date, check the mint mark, check the reverse design, and if anything looks even slightly unusual, get it in front of someone who knows how to grade it before you spend it at a coffee shop. It's a strange kind of immortality, being on a coin. Sacagawea never asked for this. She likely never imagined that 2 centuries after she carried her infant son across an unmapped continent, her face, or at least, an artist's best guess at her face, modeled on a college student who happened to share her heritage, would travel through millions of American hands, hidden in vending machines, tucked into cereal boxes, passed across casino counters, and occasionally, quietly, discovered to be worth a small fortune. That's the strange power of a coin. It's not just metal and a date. It's a small, portable monument, something millions of people touch without thinking, carrying a story most of them will never stop to read. So the next time one of these golden dollars lands in your hand, whether it's change from a vending machine or a coin your grandfather left behind in an old cigar box, take a second look. Check the year. Check the reverse. You're not just holding a dollar. You're holding an attempt, however imperfect, to put a forgotten story back into the hands of the people who forgot it. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the story behind the Sacagawea dollar, hit subscribe. Coin legacy is just getting started, and there are a lot more stories like this one buried in the coin sitting in your pocket right now. I'll see you in the next one.